Hey, you're listening to The First Walk, the podcast for artists, introspective seekers, gardeners, astronomers, pilgrims.
I think you got them all.
Who ask good questions, because that's what we need in this world.
Yes. I am Joe Shanley, co-host here, musician, activist, and the breadwinner.
I'm his housewife. No, I'm Connie Joe, a yoga teacher and educator, doodler, enthusiast of all things.
Welcome to our world. If the volume's loud enough, you have no choice but to be in it. We got a great podcast ahead of us today. So first off, our YouTube handle is The First Walk, and on Instagram, we are The First Walk Podcast. Be sure to tell your friends and ask good questions. Here we go. Hello, kings and queens and intersectional heroes. Welcome to The First Walk.
Intersectional?
Intersectional.
Intersectional.
Yeah, I was trying to get everybody. You know. It is springtime, and we've been through some changes since our last podcast. I know I have. I've been thinking a lot of things. Yeah, that happens.
Your beard looks shorter.
Yeah. I can't grow the full beard yet, so I'm not really officially releasing it until I can.
Yeah.
Too patchy. But yeah, life has been good. I've been thinking a lot about my priorities. I don't know about you. It's just like, T.S. Eliot says, like, April is the cruelest month, because when springtime comes around, it's like all the shit that you've kept frozen in winter comes to light, and then you got to clean, your backyard and the place where you put the trash cans and the emotional baggage in your heart.
He says it's the cruelest month?
Yes, April is the cruelest month.
I say it's the coolest month. I love all that stuff. That makes me tingly. T.S. Eliot sounds like a little bit of a...
Oh, he's
a little bit of a sissy.
Well, he's a morbid poet sometimes, but in like a Smith's way.
Anyone with two dots as their two initials as their name, if they're a poet, gonna be sad. Gonna be sappy. Cummings. Come on.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about like my life pursuing art and like what that means to be like a young person in society pursuing art, and I've always kind of danced on the line of taking it seriously or not. Of like really putting my resources in to make it something that that's palatable and something I'm proud of, versus, oh, this is just something I do for fun. No, haha, I'm a serious adult. I don't do things like this as a career. Like what happened for me recently is I live in this very serendipitous situation where I live with my band, and a lot of creativity happens as a result of that. But something weird was happening where when we all lived in the same house, we would play less than we would whereas if one person wasn't living here, and then when he comes over, we all jam for hours, because it's like, oh, our guitarist is here, like we got to practice.
It's like being married, like you sleep with your spouse less than you did when you were just like, living like apart.
Yeah.
I understand that. Or I would notice when I had more free time to pursue what I needed to or craved to pursue, versus when I was completely swamped with my schedule. I actually do more creative work when I'm swamped and I don't have the time. And sometimes having open-endedness, even around other people, you take it for granted a little.
Yeah. It's like sleeping in too often. You don't realize how good it is until you're like, I need sleep, but yeah, I've totally gotten that. At the times in my life where I'm the most busy, that's when I want to play guitar the most, or that's when I want to stay up late writing, nonsense the most.
Yeah, because you're not doing what you want to do. If you're busy with my work schedule or school schedule, like, then you have the craving for it, because it's like you can't. Someone's telling you can't, basically. You have this force against it. And I think a lot of change has to happen, and this is like on every global scale, with a catalyst. And sometimes that catalyst is an antagonist or like a force that poses the question, no, you have to overcome. I mean, if you want to get like metaphysical, like when you think of, have you ever read The Alchemist?
No, it's been it's been thrown on my plate so many times. I never read it though.
I don't want to tell you the whole the tale. It reads very much like a fairy tale or a fable. One of the patterns of the book is that someone's on a quest, and he's a young man, and right away he just has good luck, like back-to-back synchronicity. Things are clicking. He's so fired up. It's kind of like almost like I think of the summer season. Like everything's grooving together. He keeps meeting the right people, and then he crashes and burns, and it's just like these constant tests over and over, trying to sow doubt. And it's sort of like, okay, you had a little bit of initial beginner's luck, like that luck of having the situation of your friends, which isn't really so much luck as much as it's something you really wanted. You wanted to leave your family's house and from a pretty young age, and you worked to make it happen. You manifested it in all levels, and then this test of like, okay, so you created it, but can you sustain it? Can it still be something that serves you and not just plateaus? But there's no really wasted time, because if you learn that lesson at 24, it's like a lot of people figure that out when they're like 70 years old.
Well, you're making me rethink this whole thing right now, because I was coming at it from the angle of like, okay, what do I prioritize in life? Having fun or doing something meaningful, and being happy versus fulfilling a life of meaning and purpose for myself, which is something that we highly value in society. Like, we value veterans that sacrifice their time and the best years of their life, and sometimes their whole life, to sacrifice for the joy of the greater good, or to be a part of a story that's meaningful and purposeful. And I feel like with me, I could be very happy being minimalistic in my life, and like to strive for a life of happiness, though I don't know if that's long-term fulfillment. But now, like,
well, are you talking about comfort or complicity when you talk about, like, when you talk about happiness, what does that look like for you?
Right.
Because I think a lot of it's true of men and of women, but it manifests in different ways. The people that feel like they don't need very much can sometimes starve themselves a little bit, and maybe it's like they downloaded some message at some point that they were supposed to feel guilty about something, or there was love that they craved that they weren't getting. Or
you didn't go after the big dreams that you had when you were a kid, so you end up with regret later in life, maybe, or you get complacent in the fact that like you're a little bit satisfied, so why do more, And so this is kind of the what I was thinking was that I prefer to have a life of meaning over a life of happiness. Like, to choose as a number one priority, happiness might be number 2 or 3 for me on the list. Like, it's definitely up there, and if it comes, it's a blessing.
Happiness might just be a symptom of
living.
Yeah, it might not be. Right? I don't know if
but it doesn't always immediately look happy. Like, okay, if I want to live a life of the most purpose for me, I have to be the best me I can be, and that's like hard to stay on top of things, to stay on top of like disciplining myself. It might not mean always going out with my friends. It might mean like sacrificing some sleep moments, or not, of course, not totally sabotaging your health, but making sacrifices so that you can be a part of the story that you wish to be a part of.
Do you feel like you're happy in general now?
Yeah, I feel like I'm very happy now.
So I don't know if that necessarily needs to be the goal. Like, if there was this movie, and I don't know if I should talk on it because I haven't watched it, but the thesis and sort of the angle of the movie, I think it's called Joy, was studying people all around the world of different cultural and economic backgrounds in all walks of life, and assessing their happiness. it's a movie, and then there's been a lot of studies on this, and I'm not saying like, oh, all people in severe poverty just live like these joyous, easy, carefree lives because they don't know how bad it is, but there is sort of a higher level of happiness that is achieved at like very, very, very dire poverty. It's all about survival, so they don't like, but then there's a certain point where it's like, once you have enough versus once you're really rich, the happiness doesn't, like, you don't get more happy with more money, surprisingly. I think I think depression and despair are, not that they're Western problems, and if you live this like pure Eastern lifestyle, you're, I don't want to be disparaging or minimalizing anyone, but I think there's more traps to kind of fall into, and spirals people can go down, and a lot of the things, like if you watch children in their kind of natural state of nature, a soap bubble could just make them collapse into giggles, or like getting pushed on a swing, or being outside or being inside, like building a fort, doing what they do. Not that like you have to be in constant motion either to be happy. It seems to be a natural side effect of when you feel like you have purpose and community and stability.
Right. But there's a difference between like hedonism and just pure like going for my satisfaction and whatever joy is going to get me through the day, versus like long term, okay, I might have to suffer a little bit, but at the end I'll end up with the house or the mortgage or whatever thing that is going to satisfy me.
I've always wondered about, I've actually been thinking about this recently because I keep seeing these biopics or whatever, like biography movies of celebrities and musicians coming out. It's kind of a popular cliche of a film. There's a new one on Elton John coming out, and
oh yeah, he's next.
He's next. Yeah,
we went from Freddie Mercury to Michael Jackson now in 2019 to yeah. Well,
Michael Jackson was not really like a homage as much as it was like a expose of what everyone already knew, which is that's the most fucked up part.
But
is like
the lens was put on him a little bit closer recently, I guess, is what I mean.
Yeah. So
there's this new one on Elton John.
Yeah, and the kind of rock star cliche of like the they're at their peak. They're doing exactly what they want to do. They're at the highest level of their potential creatively, and I mean it's like the same tragic story. It seems like it's
has
faded.
A tragic story.
Yeah. Very, very severe addiction.
Oh, really?
Very severe addiction. Yeah.
I never knew. Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, he overcame it. But
who has a voice like Elton John?
My dad.
Oh yeah.
He sounds exactly like Elton John.
Yeah.
I answered that so fast. You weren't even done with the question. Who has a voice like Elton? My dad.
But so yeah, I mean,
why do you
it's
think
like
that's
like he swung very far in the pendulum of immediate joy, or I need a coping mechanism for today, versus the long-standing, okay, I'm an influential person. What is the role I play in the story that I'm a part of?
What brings people at, when they've reached their wildest dreams into such turmoil? And
I think fame and pressure of like getting on TV and dealing with all the things that they have to deal with. They can't go into a grocery store. Like a lot of famous people just sit in their house, sit in their apartment, and don't come out because like the world outside of them is just a radically different place from what they once knew, or at least I think. Who knows? But for me, like,
I wonder if there's something deeper too. Like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll say it.
No, it's okay. like we were saying, I do get a some of my deepest fulfillments in moments of art and music is when I'm the most busy and stressed out with other shit.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a cycle where if I could just become a little bit more peaceful with it, like peaceful with the anxiety of, okay, I got my bills for next month. I still have to figure out how to do that and to be an artist. Like that challenge is actually kind of cool. It actually is something that motivates me to get up a little bit earlier and, like, and find my reason why. But yeah, like I was saying, everybody's a part of a story in some way, whether you have a really big role or small role. Really, I think if you live in the first world, you have opportunity and access to information that puts you in a big role regardless. If you're here listening to this podcast, you have a pretty important role in the world that you play, whether you know it or not. We live in a time where the decisions that we make as a collective and as individuals are going to shape the future. And they're going to shape part of the story of who human beings are and what we're supposed to be. We live in a very defining time. That's fine. That just goes blank when we don't touch it.
No worries. Yeah. It's interesting. I just started a book called Women Who Run with Wolves, which I think you would like. I haven't grasped the full concept of it yet. I think it studies a lot of like female mythology and myths and how it intersects with how we live and womenology, kind of. There's this idea, kind of one of the theses of the book, that there's like a innate wildness, animal nature in women that through institutional repression, like government and religion and a lot of cultural, societal stuff that has bled from those sources, to undo that kind of those innate drives and desires.
So, like, give me an example.
I think sexuality is kind of the most obvious, like when you think of that concept, but it could also be intellectual pursuit, and like just independence and autonomy. What you want to do with your life. I mean, a few hundred years ago, me leaving my family as an unmarried person, going to college, studying politics and religion, and voting, and then on my own, traveling around and living with men and other women, not necessarily like in a relationship, but just like, but sometimes I've been in relationships where you like cohabited and weren't married, and those things are very unthinkable and would be very shameful to my family and could actually injure, like it could really hurt my family. And if I had a younger sister and I did something scandalous and she was not able to be married, and wasn't able to work or help her parents, we would all starve probably. Right. Or they would have to enact some kind of violence on me to distance themselves. And
well, that goes into there. What we're talking about like you're being self-conscious about the role that you're playing in your family.
Yeah.
And a little bit about the role you're playing as a woman in society.
I think as much as I would have liked to say I always would have been iconoclastic or rebellious, I think also I don't know how realistic that is. I think in the context of that time period, I would want to please my family, and I would probably have fallen in line with the structure of that time, even if I was miserable, because it's what you're expected to do. And I think women this is also a male problem too, but a lot of women are very perceptive of other people's feelings and can anticipate their wants, and when you want to please other people, that can be also a burden. And we've kind of now entered, in the past 50-60 years, or 40-50 years, now the the door kind of swung open, and people didn't know what to do with it. And a lot of people.
What do you mean on society's expectations of what you should be?
Yeah, the Aquarian thing, the 60s.
Uh-huh.
Now, you know, people can really lose themselves in excess.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an unfortunate, maybe like first casualty of loosening the grip. Like it was inevitable. Okay, the repression is minimized, or, you know, the opportunity for you to go be free is here. And it's like a very sheltered kid just going to college and binge drinking and falling off the roof. Like, so many people were lost, whether it was actual death or drug addiction or wandering into the Manson cult. You know?
I think that happens every time the level of orthodoxy or the level of conservatism that, like, when old values become released.
Be careful of that word.
What do you mean?
Conservative.
Right. Well, just in the sense that conservatives want to preserve values, and progressives want to move things forward. Mm-hmm. There's people that don't adapt to the change correctly, or as an entire society, you can have new phenomenons that didn't exist before, like the loosening of the grip of Catholicism or just Christian thinking on Western culture moved us into, as much as it freed us from that thinking, it's like kind of the only thing that's more dangerous than a society with a god is a society without one. You know, one where you don't have this higher set of principles that citizens are supposed to attain to. Where do they get the morality from? If you don't have the nuclear family in the 50s, a prototype, a model of what you should be as an American, when that thing disintegrates and you realize that that was just bullshit that they were forcing down on us, what is there to be in replacement? And I think there's all kinds of answers for those questions. It's interesting to see the scramble of new values once an old ideology crumbles apart. I
think too, it's a push-pull. So I'm rejecting the old ideas. People that now feel that they're threatened, there's sort of a natural ramping up and desire to preserve those ideas. Just like the same catalyst, the further, you know, not to overuse the term like social justice warrior, but the further those people are able to push the narrative in the culture war to the point of, you know, dizziness, where like a moderate Democrat voter, like my parents or even my grandma, who's 99, shout out Grandma Connie, they're over, like, they're, whoa, like these gender neutral trans, like, children in schools need to have drag queens come to their library, like, all that stuff. I'm not even saying if it's good or bad. It's just that's Republican fodder for saying, like, what, this is weird, vote for us. Like, the further one side goes, the more discord sowed on the other side. And it's disappointing now, because we're living in a society, finally, like, I'm very grateful to be living. We can have a podcast. We can talk about.
We live in a society.
We live in a society. And we can say kind of whatever we want without getting arrested. I mean, there's certain things we just shouldn't say and couldn't say, but we can criticize the government and not have someone banging on our door the next morning or threatening our families. So we live in a society.
But people have to be realistic about, like,
well, free speech is,
there's a lot of comparisons in like the social justice warrior movement. I think what you're trying to say is it alienates a lot of people, and it's like, I don't choose.
I think it benefits conservatism more than any other. I think social, and I used to be angry that term was used disparagingly, because I'm like, what? I like social justice. I like the word warrior. It's powerful sounding. I mean, I think about our history. We lived in villages and tribes, and in some ways there was wisdom to that, and great medicine and mysteries and knowledge. And in some ways it was totally barbaric, and there were slaves, and you'd get your head cut off if you went to the wrong village, and you died at 40 years old or whatever. And then for most of our modern history, we were contained and repressed, or colonized, or being the colonizers,
right?
Vice versa.
So bringing awareness to that stuff is so important. The point I was trying to make, though, I kind of want to backtrack a bit because I said something that isn't.
We're both trying to backtrack to the point we're doing.
Yeah, but so you kind of have to judge movements by the effectiveness of the language that they use, and sometimes there can be this kind of uncompromising value system that, it's like people are very quick to call people Nazis or communists. Where if you look at the true historical comparison of like, no, they're not. You have to be careful about the words you use, because if someone doesn't identify with that and they're being like a term like that's being thrown at them, it's polarizing. It doesn't bring people together. It doesn't help gap the understanding bridge that is already pretty big in terms of ideological worldviews. So you have to words that aren't effective, or words that have a history of being abused, I just try not to use. I try not to use the word trap,
Really?
or, well, yeah. I mean, the word has derogatory, I'll use it in the context and not in the context of talking about a trans person. You see what I'm saying? Because that has a history behind it.
I don't know the connotation between trap and trans.
To call someone a trap is like they're trapping you into an experience.
Okay, so if a trans person who's passing, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone would choose to experience the levels of violence, suicide, being shunned from your families, joblessness, poverty, homelessness, drug abuse. I mean, it's almost a death sentence. And, I empathize with those people a lot and their families. I want to be careful of how I speak too. I don't want to tiptoe when we're trying to make broad points.
Because you want to be proactive and supportive of the movements of lifting up people that have had a shitty roll of the dice, where they've been put in a society where they're systematically oppressed, or they just don't have the resources and opportunities that we have. You don't want to be ignorant of that, but that doesn't mean that you can't criticize a movement that that is their ultimate goal. I think there's a lot of anytime a legitimate movement like this pops up where there's problems that need to be fixed in society, there's always things that will be planted in the movement or naturally occurring in the movement, which is toxic, that the other side will point out. So I support the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't support the people that run the Black Lives Matter organization because of the things that they do. And that is used as a point to dismiss the entire movement itself. So just because you criticize the movement, I think that's why we're trying to be careful here about what we say, because you have reservations about how they do things doesn't mean that you don't agree with the ultimate goal of, we have to stop the uprising of fascism in a society. We have to help marginally oppressed groups.
There's so many examples, and this is I want to say it's a side effect of the internet, but it also happened many times throughout history where the left is just so quick to eat its own, and especially the progress we've made has been so rapid, and year to year, okay, this word we can't say. We need to tread lightly on this or avoid. I mean, look at some of the comedy routines from 5-10 years ago, or what presidential candidates' positions were 10 years ago. Obama ran in 2008 against legalizing gay marriage across the board.
It's
and that
strange
was not...
as the noose is getting tighter in these instances. You still have this
Well,
rise
noose?
of like,
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not mad
this
at
kind
that word.
of
Just interesting.
The need to regulate these things, have public conversations at them, look at them more closely, and hold people accountable for what they did. Like you're saying, comedy has changed. The way people talk about society in general has changed. At the same time, you have the Trump movement and the people that think all of this political correctness, all this social justice, progress is the opposite, and that it's something that gets in the way of true American values. You have these two things are juxtaposing each other but becoming more intense at the same time.
I think it's sad that we are in maybe one of the most free societies that's ever lived throughout history, and we're not embracing of our natural biology. I'm not talking about like trans now, because that's like sort of a modernist versus postmodern debate of like, are we just our nature, or do we, is there a choice in who we are based on our life experiences and what we're exposed to? And sometimes I'm like, oh, is people's maladaptive behavior, or our psychoses, or our sicknesses, our mental and physical limitations, and all these like cropping up of Western issues, is that environmental? Is the food and the air just so saturated in glyphosate and Roundup that our DNA is collapsing, or is it the screens? Or, like, I mean, I could get very hypochondriac on it.
What is wrong with these kids? Is it the screens? Is it the video games? I think
we're
it's
the
video
kids
games.
too. I mean, I didn't play video games, and I still had like cuckoo things.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of misconceptions about what changes society and what influences kids. Misconceptions from adults about that, but you really have to be like in the world the kid is in to understand, and they fucking know how to work that iPad, man. Like if that's the world that they're exposed to, and it's a thing that we're kind of like in our mid-20s, one of the last generations to really grow up without the internet being so prevalent in our lives as it is now. So be able to I'll be able to tell my grandson, when I was your age, there was no Twitter.
Do you think you'll have a grandson?
I don't know.
Would you rather be a grandpa or a dad? I feel like I'd rather be a grandma almost.
It's gonna be sick to have grandkids. I would like that experience, that human experience of going through that.
I can't even imagine like loving a kid and then that kid having a kid. What?
Yeah, that's insane.
That's like if my cat had. I was gonna say if my cat had puppies. I would love it if my cat had puppies. But yeah, something like that.
I was an Uber driver. Like back in the day before cars drove themselves, I drove people around. That's fucking weird. Yeah.
I work occasionally. I substitute teach, and I work sometimes in the program is called Praise, which is it's an acronym. I don't even think the teachers know what it stands for, to be honest, because it used to be something called ABA.
We'll make something up for what it more accurately stands for.
It's children with pretty severe autism who some of them are, I don't even think low functioning, but like life skills is the goal, basically. And it's awesome. We now, in the district I work in, they just added a kindergarten program, and then it feeds all through high school. They can stay in it till they're 21. I've seen the end result, which is the high school program, and they have a fully functioning cafe that those students run, and teachers can put in orders. They learn how to ring it up, how to make change, how to deliver it, like how to interact. They get a field trip every day they have several different jobs at a movie theater or at a supermarket. They learn like the useful math they need to know, reading, writing. They meet them at their level. They all get services, usually speech or OT, which is like kind of spatial awareness, like body conditioning and physical therapy, all these great services. And I was in the kindergarten, which I didn't even know they had a kindergarten praise program. It's very new. And the boy who is the most behavioral in the class, who can be violent, I watched him have a meltdown during, it was a speech class, kind of group speech class. He is a talker, it's a program on the iPad, the regular iPad. I'm pretty sure you can download it as an app, and then you program all the words that you think are going to be important for that child. So maybe like, the colors, the feelings, like different things they might want. You can customize it. Cause a lot of them get fixated on things and work for rewards. Like there's a girl who's obsessed with sprinkles, or a boy who was obsessed with cans, and like I let him hold my can as a reward. There was one kid I worked with who would work for something called Dinosaur. I'm working for Dinosaur. And he would just hit himself with it. Just stimming, like he would just whack himself with the dinosaur. Not hurt himself, but just bang, 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 bang. I'm vamping a little. So this one boy we were working with really wanted a specific toy and didn't want to work. And he's getting extremely upset. He's like trying to hurt his teacher. And he grabs the talker and he presses the feelings button and he presses the angry button. Angry. And he just press. Angry. And
Wow.
I'm like, this kid is barely 5 years old. And he is telling her he's angry, which a lot of adults won't even say, like, I am feeling upset. And she praised him. Like, we were all very impressed. And then he said what he wanted. And then she explained, we can give you a toy, but we need to work first. And he pressed the no button a bunch of times. And, yeah, I mean, if a kid has the ability to talk, they don't like using the talker because they'll lean on it. But children and people in general, when they can't communicate, that's why children experience the terrible twos. They throw so many tantrums when they're young, because most children aren't speaking that young. I, for whatever reason, was speaking a lot, and I didn't throw tantrums because of it. And when my sister was growing up, she had hearing problems, and so she didn't talk.
So that makes sense, that like a child that can articulate themselves better wouldn't need to have emotional fits.
No. I just had them when I was like in my 20s. And what's interesting is my sister didn't have too many tantrums either, because I non-verbally would communicate her needs. And I wish I could observe what we were doing, but like I would just watch her, or we had some kind of sign language. Or I guess I was small. I was playing at her level because we're only 2 years apart.
Right.
So
you think that affected her speech growing up?
That she didn't speak as early as she could have because I was doing it for her? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she could, like, if she wanted to. She was extremely smart, like passing all these tests with flying colors.
I remember not wanting to get into arguments with my cousins because they were better at arguing than I was. That I was not good at articulating my words, so I would run to my mom and be like, give her a brief synopsis of what happened, but also like, they're better at arguing, so back me up.
That's why you're such a wordsmith now, probably.
So the kid was, a 5-year-old kid was using this speech talker thing in a way that helped him genuinely express himself. I mean, I think it's amazing for how it helps kids, especially a little bit on the autistic spectrum, express themselves if they can't do that on their own. What I worry about is like what loss of real visceral communication skills they lose.
Those specific kids or children in general?
Children in general, it really it hits it hits me with my youngest sister and like just young people in general, how glued they are to screens, and how like when an adult comes up to you and gives you attention, that's usually something that kids relish in, but I find that less now because it's like I feel like I'm prying out time and attention from kids when it should be the opposite way, or when it usually is the opposite way. When I was a kid, I would love the attention from adults.
Yeah.
So like, again, it's like going back to every time there's like a radical paradigm shift in society. Well, all of a sudden everybody's got a computer in their pocket. Like, what does that do to people's brains? And I know it's obvious and it's cliche and it's been talked about, but like I broke my phone and I didn't have one for 2 days, and I was like a different level of happy and more creative in those 2 days. It was amazing. I'm like, I have to do this more.
I went a year without a phone.
A lot of people don't have the luxury of doing something like that.
No, most people don't.
They should write
families
a documentary on that year or something, or like interview you. Like,
no.
What was it like, Connie?
Yeah, I leave this house and just a swarm of people are outside. It actually happened. It would happen every few months. I didn't get a phone until I was 16, which I was born in 93, so I actually was like one of the later. Everyone I knew had a phone in middle school.
Did you really want one?
I wanted one so bad.
Your parents had reservations against getting you one, yeah? 100%. You think rightly so?
Yeah. They were both teachers. The problem was I was involved in a million after-school activities, and there's been so many miscommunications where not having a phone, fucked me up. So I had like, I have a reason. I'm going to be driving really soon, and like, I just wanted to text. And I'm also the kind of person that when I was a kid, when my parents would put restrictions on TV, the second they would leave me alone, I could sit and watch TV for 7 hours.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I have a very addictive personality, and yeah, I was obsessed. I had this tiny little flip phone.
It's not always bad either. Like, I see, like, kids are making like their own masterpieces in Minecraft and like other worlds that don't exist.
Yeah.
And that's always pretty crazy to me. I still grew up playing video games and television, not so much on the internet, but particularly video games hit me pretty hard. And I don't feel like it affected my cognition negatively, other than the fact that it maybe affected how I socialized at the time. But I think it helped me in certain ways process information more quickly, because video games are interactive, whereas television is more passive.
There's, I think, a reason why also boys are attracted to video. Not that girls aren't, because I only had one video game. It was a hand-me-down from my brother, and it was like a Mario video game from the early 90s. That was all I had. And then I got Guitar Hero 2. And then my sister got this game where you would just ride around on a horse. There was no like winning, like you would just sometimes groom it and like have to feed it, but it was kind of like Sims but for horses. It was so cool.
Well, that's the game that girls play, right?
It was literally like boys like that checking off the box of accomplishment that you get from life, but also from video games. Girls want to like, like I just wanted to make stuff and like create things, and I was such an idea person. Like if I had friends over, it was like, okay, well, Connie, you're good with games. Like, come up with something. Like, there was always I loved doing stuff like that. And so if there was a game I could just zone out into, for some reason that was so attractive. But I mean, as obsessed as I was, sort of like, my phone would get taken away a lot if I didn't, I didn't really do anything bad in high school, but
Did your parents go through your messages?
My mom was very, like, I had to come home from school. I would hand her my bag. She would go through all my stuff. She would read, like, all my notebooks. She would go through all my texts, read my emails. She still does this. Like, if I don't log out, you bet your bottom dollar she's going to read all my emails and texts. And
Do you agree with that? Because I feel like you should kind of respect the kid's privacy to an extent.
I agree with it when I'm the kid, when I'm the parent, and
Mm.
my 9-year-old wants to go on Snapchat or whatever the, equivalent of that will be in her time. I mean, I just feel I don't want to be a helicopter parent. If we lived before phones, go out, come back when the streetlights, turn down, go play outside all day. Now it's like, even if I'm the ideal parent that I want to be, my kids have interesting hobbies and, they're living their little lives, and I'm nourishing them in every way I can. We're learning about nutrition and the planet around us and self-defense and stories and creating their own things and letting them be their own people and accepting them for who they are. I can't control what their friends' parents do. I can't control what their teachers or classmates do. And if they're all ADD obsessed, like screen addicted, like junk food inhaling, very unconscious people, it's like my influence will wane so much over time. And who knows what the thing will be then? Like, who knows what the drug that is going to destroy them will be?
You have to change your strategy every time. Each generation has a unique set of challenges that you can't apply the same rules when we were kids to kids today to our parents too. So there's this generational misunderstanding, I think, where it's like, I want to take the values that I was raised up with a kid or my parents' shortcomings and react the correct way to raising my child. But your child is being raised in a different world than when your parents are raising you.
I don't know. I empathize with the idea that of commune living. It makes, I also have the tendency to want to just run away, start over, burn everything down, new thing, try it out. Like, that's my default, for good or for bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. Not necessarily a good thing. Like, it's brought me good and bad things. But I'll say good because even the bad things are lessons. It's so appealing because I wouldn't want to have my kids grow up where I grew up. Not that I'm knocking my parents' choices in that, and there's so many. I would rather live here than almost anywhere in the world if you think about the condition that most children statistically are grown up in. I almost have this fantasy, and I don't know if it's me wanting to hyper control situations, but I want to feel safe. I want to feel proud of the community I'm bringing my children in and know that, and having that village mentality, like that seems the most natural to me, that we're going to have.
Well, that's what historically we grew up in. We didn't grow up in large societies with hundreds of thousands of people around us that we don't know. We grew up in small communities of 50 to 100 people where we recognize everybody's face. And that's why I think when you see people get in the cities, they behave differently than they do elsewhere. Yeah. Like there's this one study done on grasshoppers, actually, where they're studying grasshoppers in these grasslands in Africa, and as the grasslands dried up, there were fewer places where the grasshoppers could have a healthy habitat, and so their population just became more dense. And when that happened, their behavior changed. They started acting strange, eating each other, just walking back or going in circles, doing things that don't make as much sense. And then the drought ended and rain came back and more of the grasslands grew and they were able to spread out, and then their behavior changed back to normal. And I think you can extend the metaphor to humans a little bit, is we are getting into a sensory overload in the modern world with technology, with large cities, with every aspect of our society. And there's so many good things that come with that, but it's just different in every sense of the word. There's so many, all the variables have changed.
Oh man. Yeah, I have this fantasy of living in a town with a main street, and I want to be able to walk from my house to somewhere and not need a car or take a bike. I want to be close to a forest or a lake or a beach. I think those are simple things. I want to be able to know the people that I'm around and be able to support the message of the schools. I mean, my boyfriend really is like, he's so against school. It's interesting because my whole family are teachers. Everyone in my family, including me. And so, what? Not, like, you don't love public schools? But we share the exact same things. We find the same things distasteful. I think children need those experiences and other children around them and another adult that isn't me, and I can't be. I don't want to be there. I want to hog their life,
right,
or force things down them and disable them. But
so this kind of goes back to that first question on the podcast of like purpose versus a life of like joy and happiness. Like the thing you're describing right now, it sounds great. Like sign me up for that shit. But part of the reason I think why, say, the hippie communes of the 60s never really had a huge impact on society was because everybody moved away from industry and cities and moved to places where they can create their own reality, but then the reality that they moved away from still existed.
Yeah,
so
they took
like,
all their illnesses with them. And
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. This is why it's kind of like, for me, it's like an internal battle. It's like, okay, do I want to go off and do something like that? Or do I sacrifice that dream, or maybe the full extent of that dream, for the greater good of society? And, you know, it's just about re-examining the story that I live in and understanding my role, which is something that, as spring 2019 rolls around, I'm still considering. It's an exciting question to have sitting in your heart too.
That one of the big questions that's been weighing on me is like, do I want to work in an institution I don't believe in but am needed in, such as a public school, where I don't necessarily agree with the philosophies, but I see the need and the void that I could fill, and I'm surrounded by, you know, innocent children. And it kind of like potentially crush my spirit, potentially be fulfilling.
You gotta live
most
your
likely
life, you
both.
know? You can't
or should I try to find and carve out the you know, the ideal environment? I think where the communes went wrong is denying the technology and the advancements, because I think still, like, the whatever that equivalent of that idea is today, there's this idea of going back. Well, the Native Americans had it right. No, the ancient whatever have it right. I mean, ideally, we're taking lessons and improving.
We want to integrate the future, integrate technology into whatever society we create. You know,
who knows how many things we can engineer our way out of using ancient medicine and ancient technology with the capacity for growth that we have today. The environmental strides we could take, the strides in health and quality of life and education. So I don't know, like, as much as it's like a moral, philosophical thing, like, I want to be in the best possible environment, like the best, like, picture going down a slide with, like, it's like, do you want to be on one that, like, is all lubed up and just like where you can just go far and go fast? Or do you want to be like, have all this sticky sap and branches and stuff in the way? You gotta, like, all right, well, it's important for me to be on this slide, and, like, you're gonna help people as you go down, but you can't perhaps go
It's
as
a bumpy
far.
ass ride.
It's a bumpy
Yeah.
ass.
I don't think there's one
ride.
set answer. I think it depends on the details, but it's certainly the right question to be asking yourself. Where do I fit in the story, and where do my priorities lie in terms of meaningful life and purpose and happy life? And hopefully there's some sort of a balance between the two.
I've asked this question to so many people, and I always get a different answer. Or sometimes I get the same answer for completely different reasons. My parents are very much like, interesting, right? Well, I understand exactly why my mom is so resolute with like, do the one that's safe, super reliable, and potentially could like, okay, I want to be a yoga teacher. I want this path that's not clear cut. In fact, its definition is rogue, and you have to create a niche, and I don't even know what it will look like. For her, no. And I understand the way she grew up, the comfort was synonymous with happiness, security, and I mean, I don't even know if she knows how well she manifested everything she wanted, down to the golden retriever. And
it's like a proverbial mentality. It's a popular mindset it's
especially among women, you know, and so many props for her for carving out the life she wanted and needed. My dad grew up more secure financially and emotionally, and a risk taker. He was a musician for like all throughout his 20s. That was all he cared about. All he wanted to do was go on tour and be a rock star. And he met my brother's mom, and he thought he was going to marry her because they were going to have a child together, and she left. That he met my mom like by chance in a library. She was working in a library.
Nice. It's a good place to meet a woman.
Isn't it? Oh my gosh. And you like passed her a little note. Oh my gosh, so cute.
Yeah.
So it's like,
so see that just where your priorities lie could change the outcome and the love of your life.
He expresses regret or wistfulness maybe for not having that side of him explored to the fullest. Like he didn't get to see where that would have gone and what it would have become. On the other hand, he wouldn't have been able to be there for us, and I might not exist, or the version of me wouldn't exist with him not being there as a music teacher, and so present. He has summers off, his weekends off, he has all these breaks off. He gets to spend so much time with us growing up.
I love to dissect these cases and see like the compromises of where when people chose what path, what ends did they have to tie up.
There's an alternative reality where he went left instead of right.
And if anybody listening has gotten to this far in the podcast, please leave a comment on like what you think about this priority situation of balance, and maybe speak to like where you're at in that stage. That would be if we got fucking comments on that, that would mean that people listen to this far and that they're listening in general, and I'd be fucking thrilled to read any.
I think we should have a question of the week as well as a song of the week.
Well, that's definitely the question, is where do your priorities lie on the spectrum of purpose and happiness?
Yeah, top 3.
And song of the week. I have an idea now, but did you have one?
No.
Okay, so you ever listen to Daniel Johnston?
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know how I feel about Daniel Johnston.
Okay, so there's this he has some depressing songs sometimes.
Yeah.
But he's come around. There's this one, we're going to listen to it after this. Life is Full of Joy.
Love it.
So you can't go wrong with that. But
wait, that's so
I love the story behind it, like the come up story. He was a McDonald's employee that would put his homemade mixtapes that he made into Happy Meals. And then that started circulating at local record stores. And then MTV did a special on him, and it kind of like picked up from there. But he's so raw and pure in his expression, But Daniel Johnston, Life is Full of Joy. It's going to make you smile. And thank you guys for listening. I think we can call it a podcast, right?
Over and out.
Oh yeah! Wow, we reached an hour. Okay, we made it. So ask good questions and fail better. This is The First Walk.